Hello friends, welcome to Gentlemen Cadet Academy GCA. Hope you all are doing good. So today the video is regarding India-Pakistan conflict of 2025, that is the recent escalation between both the countries, mainly focusing on Operation Sindoor. And before this, I have already uploaded two videos on India-Pak relations. One is a 30 minutes detailed video and second is a short and crisp video, that is India-Pak relations of 2024. If you want to watch both these videos, the link is available in the I button. So this video will focus only on the recent escalation and the timeline of the events that occurred during the escalation. So again, without wasting any time, let us start. So starting with the India-Pakistan conflict of 2025, let us first discuss a little bit about the background. So the main reason of dispute between India and Pakistan from last many decades is the Kashmir issue. So in this video, I will not be discussing in detail about the Kashmir dispute because a separate video is coming for this topic very soon. So after the partition of British India into India and Pakistan, Kashmir decided to remain as an independent identity. And later on, the instrument of accession was signed between Maharaja of Kashmir and India. And from the very beginning, the state's accession to India was challenged by Pakistan, resulting in the First Indo-Pak War of 1947 and 48. And despite numerous international and bilateral interventions, including UN resolutions and the Shimla Agreement, Kashmir has remained a contested and a highly volatile region. And over the decades, region has witnessed large-scale insurgencies, proxy wars sponsored by Pakistan, and with both India and Pakistan now possessing nuclear weapons, Kashmir has turned into a less bilateral dispute and more a global concern. So the continued militarization of the line of control, the presence of jihadist terror networks, and the failure of peace-building measures have combined to turn Kashmir into what many call as the world's most dangerous nuclear flashpoint. Now, starting with the initiation of the recent escalation, so the immediate trigger was the Pahalgam terror attack, which was carried out on April 22 in Saran Valley near Pahalgam, which is a renowned tourist destination in South Kashmir. During the early afternoon, a group of 5 militants armed with advanced weaponry such as M4 carbines and AK-47 assault rifles, they carried out a brutal and deliberate assault on a camp of Hindu tourists and pilgrims. The timing and the location of the attack were strategic during the peak tourist season when India was heavily promoting Kashmir as a safe for domestic and international tourism. The attack not only resulted in dozens of civilian casualties but also sent a psychological shockwave across the nation, drawing parallels with the 2008 Mumbai attacks. So initially the attack was claimed by the Resistance Front, that is the TRF, which is a terror outfit linked with Pakistan's ISI. The targeting of civilians, especially religious pilgrims, was calculated to provoke public outrage and force the Indian government into action. And following the Pahalgam attack, India retaliated diplomatically. Indus Water Treaty was suspended, all the visas to Pakistani nationals were cancelled, and cross-border travel was effectively frozen. Airspace between both the nations were closed, severely impacting regional connectivity and commerce, and both the countries recalled their ambassadors, plunging bilateral diplomatic relations to their lowest point in the recent history. And through these actions, India signaled a doctrinal shift from strategic restraint to assertive deterrence, using diplomatic tools to isolate Pakistan internationally and convey a zero-tolerance policy on cross-border terrorism. So now moving to the Operation Sindoor part. So just 2 weeks after the Pahalgam attack, Indian Armed Forces retaliated by launching Operation Sindoor on the night of May 7, 2025, a well-planned military campaign designed to deliver retaliation without crossing the threshold into full-scale war. So the operation's codename Sindoor evoked a symbolism which is rooted in Indian culture, possibly indicating the protection of family integrity. So the operation involved coordinated precision strikes by the Indian Air Force and the unmanned aerial platforms against identified terror infrastructure located in both Pakistan-occupied Kashmir and within the mainland Pakistan. So unlike the past air strikes such as Balakot of 2019, which were mainly confined to POK adjacent areas, Operation Sindoor targeted a deeper strategic radius. So the key strikes included were Muzaffarabad and Kotli in POK, as well as command centers in Bahawalpur, armed depots in Hangu, and logistics nodes in cities such as Multan, Murdike, and Manshira. And the wide geographical spread demonstrated India's improved ISR, that is intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance capability, and the political will to pursue non-state actors beyond traditional confines. So the planning also included careful deconfliction to avoid civilian casualties and avoid escalation with the Pakistan military. Now talking about the operational execution. So the operational component of Sindoor was characterized by speed, stealth and surgical precision. Indian fighter squadrons including Rafale and Mirage 2000 aircraft executed nighttime strikes under the conditions of electronic jamming and GPS spoofing to evade Pakistani air defenses, and they were backed by UAVs like Heron and Rustam 2, which provided real-time surveillance and laser-guided targeted support. And the Indian Air Force reportedly hit over 15 high-value targets, including a TRF coordination center and a drone production facility linked to Pakistan's ISI. And most importantly, Indian forces avoided hitting conventional Pakistani military installations, thereby maintaining the narrative of a counter-terror operation rather than a declaration of war. And in response, Pakistan launched a disinformation campaign, falsely alleging civilian casualties, and retaliated with artillery strikes on Indian border villages, particularly in the Punch sector, killing innocent civilians. Now, let us talk about the escalation after the Operation Sindoor. So, on May 8, Pakistan launched a counter-offensive involving air and drone strikes aimed at Indian military facilities in areas like Avantipura, Srinagar, Jalandhar, Ludhiana, Bathinda, Amritsar, Adampur, and even as far as Chandigarh. So, this marked a significant escalation as Pakistan sought to respond not merely symbolically but with targeted kinetic action. However, India's robust and layered air defense systems, including the S-400 and Akash, successfully intercepted all of these attempts, and India's counterstrike was immediate and devastating. It focused on degrading Pakistan's military assets, including the destruction of an HQ-9 missile battery, an airborne warning and control system, and several drone assets. India's message was very clear: any escalation would be met with disproportionate and precision retaliation, reaffirming its new operational doctrine. Then, in the following days, Pakistan made additional attempts to strike Indian military installations in cities like Jammu, Jaisalmer, and Pathankot, and all these attacks were intercepted with no damage. And according to the Indian intelligence, multiple Pakistani aircraft, including F-16s and JF-17s, were downed, and the failure of Pakistan's offensive was compounded by internal confusion and a faltering narrative. And also, the IPL match between Punjab Kings and Delhi Capitals at Dharamshala was cancelled due to security concerns, which symbolized the seriousness of the situation domestically. And Pakistan's military objectives remained unfulfilled, and its retaliatory credibility was eroded, leaving it diplomatically cornered. Moving forward, on May 10, ceasefire agreement was reached amid growing international concerns. So both the countries, they agreed to ceasefire mediated by the United States. So Pakistan portrayed the ceasefire as a successful check on Indian aggression, while India framed it as an operational success, stating that its objective had been achieved and further escalation was unnecessary. So notably, Prime Minister Narendra Modi emphasized that ceasefire was India's choice, not a consequence of external pressure. So this distinction was crucial for India's domestic narrative and international positioning. So the ceasefire reflected a mutual desire to avoid full-scale war, especially considering both nations' nuclear status, but did not signify reconciliation or normalization. Now, talking about the post-ceasefire dynamics, on May 13, India publicly rejected US President Trump's claim that trade incentives were part of the ceasefire negotiation. Diplomatic relations continued to soar, with tit-for-tat expulsions of diplomats and renewed incidents along the line of control. India retained punitive measures enacted during the conflict, which include visa bans, trade halts, and a freeze on the Indus Water Treaty, signaling that peace remained conditional on Pakistan's dismantling of terror infrastructure. And India also made it clear that the current calm was a pause, not a resolution, and that the right to future retaliation remained reserved. Now, let us discuss the misinformation spread by Pakistan after Operation Sindoor. So, after the Indian military carried out Operation Sindoor, Pakistan started a large disinformation campaign. The goal was basically to make the world believe that India had acted unfairly and caused a lot of harm to innocent people. Pakistani government news channels and many social media accounts claimed that Indian airstrikes had killed many civilians. They said that strikes had hit sensitive areas like schools and hospitals. So the claims were designed to create anger and sympathy around the world. But when experts looked closely at the pictures and the videos Pakistan shared, they found that many of them were not real. Some images were edited, others were taken from old conflicts in countries like Syria and Gaza, not from the recent operation. And Pakistan also accused India of using cluster bombs, which were banned in many countries because they can harm civilians even after the fighting is over. India strongly denied using such weapons, International observers who checked the area also found no evidence to support Pakistan's accusation. And another part of the campaign involved the militant group known as the TRF, that is the Resistant Front. So at first, TRF claimed responsibility for the certain actions, but later they took back their statement. So Pakistan used this reversal to suggest that India had staged the attack itself and what is often called a false flag operation so that it could blame others. However, there was no strong evidence for this claim either. So in truth, the Indian military had carefully planned the operation to avoid hitting civilian areas, and India even released satellite images to prove that its strikes were targeted only at terror-related sites. And this was done to show the international community that India was acting responsibly and with transparency. And Pakistan's disinformation campaign was well organized. It used fake social media accounts, automated bots, and emotional hashtags to spread its message quickly. And these efforts were mainly aimed at people in other countries and the member of the Pakistani diaspora. So the hope was to create international pressure against India. Now let us discuss why Pakistani celebrated after the ceasefire. So Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif quickly redefined ceasefire as a victory, even though there were operational failures on the ground. The government tried to control the narrative by calling May 10 as Yom-e-Marka-e-Haq, which is the day of the Battle of the Truth, and organized military parades and public gathering in major cities. The goal was basically clear: to show strength, unity, and military power to the people of Pakistan, who had been facing criticism from the international community and were aware of the military losses. The government wanted to assure the public that they had achieved something positive despite the failures. So, for ordinary citizens, especially those living in areas closer to the border, the ceasefire brought immediate relief and they were happy to see the fighting stop. And this was also seen as a positive outcome for them, regardless of the government's political message. So the celebrations served as a way for the government to strengthen the image of the military, as we all are aware that military controls Pakistan. So making sure that any questions about operation failures were kept out of the public conversation. So by focusing on the ceasefire as a victory, the government aimed to prevent criticism of army's performance and maintain support for the military's role in Pakistan. And this move was a strategic effort to unite the country and reinforce army's authority in the eyes of the people of Pakistan. Let's discuss the key aspects of India's response after the ceasefire. So after the ceasefire, India adopted a cautious and a watchful approach, focusing on security rather than seeking peace. Government led by PM Modi made it clear that military action had only been temporarily stopped, not completely ended. Indian leaders said that any future talks with Pakistan would focus only on two main issues. First is terrorism and second is on Pakistan occupied Kashmir. So this showed that India wasn't interested in discussing other matters such as cultural exchanges, trade, or confidence building measures, and decided to suspend these indefinitely. So at the same time, India's military stayed alert and ready. They kept their forces stationed at important locations and air bases were maintained at full operational capacity. So this meant India was prepared for any possible military action if needed. So these actions showed a bigger change in India's security strategy. The country was now making it clear that it would no longer tolerate cross-border terrorism, that there would be no negotiations with Pakistan unless they were accountability for the acts of terrorism. And India's approach became more focused on protecting its security and interest, with little interest in engaging in discussions that didn't directly address these serious issues. So the overall message was one of strength, readiness, and a clear refusal to accept anything less than the full responsibility for past actions, especially concerning terrorism. Now moving to the last and the most important part of the video, that is the success of Operation Sindoor. So Operation Sindoor stand out as a landmark moment in India's national security and military history, not only for its overwhelming success on the battlefield, but also for its broader strategic and diplomatic implications. The operation was meticulously planned and flawlessly executed military strike aimed at dismantling the infrastructure of cross-border terrorism. So it specifically targeted 9 major terrorist camps, 5 located in POK and 4 deep inside Pakistan's mainland. And these camps were known hub for militant organizations such as Lashkar-e-Taiba and Jaish-e-Mohammed, groups that have long posed a serious threat to India's internal security, and resulted in the elimination of over 100 militants, including several high-ranking commanders and planners responsible for coordinating attacks on Indian soil. And this dealt a severe blow to the leadership and operational capacity of these terror outfits. Furthermore, Indian forces managed to inflict significant damage to Pakistan's military infrastructure, including key assets of its air force and some Pakistani air bases were rendered temporarily inoperable, highlighting the precision and the effectiveness of the Indian strike. So, what made Operation Sindoor particularly remarkable was India's use of advanced state of the art military technology, and this included the deployment of high end surveillance drones for real time intelligence, precision guided munitions to minimize collateral damage, and cyber warfare capabilities to disrupt enemy communications infrastructure. And all these technological tools enabled a high level of accuracy and coordination, marking a clear shift from traditional military tactics to a new era of high tech and hybrid warfare. And it was also a demonstration that India's military is not only robust but also technologically sophisticated and capable of conducting complex operations with minimal footprint. So, beyond the military achievements, the operation signified a paradigm shift in India's strategic posture. Historically, India has often exercised restraint in the face of provocation, opting for diplomatic channels and international pressure rather than direct retaliation. So, Operation Sindoor marked a departure from that stance, sending a strong and clear message to both state and non state actors that India will no longer tolerate attack on its sovereignty without a forceful and timely response. So, this new doctrine of proactive defense has redefined the rules of engagement for dealing with terrorism emanating from across the border. And on the diplomatic front, India acted with unprecedented clarity and coordination. Immediately after the operation, Indian government launched a comprehensive diplomatic outreach, briefing foreign envoys and providing them with verifiable intelligence and evidence of targeted camps and militant casualties. So, this proactive international engagement helped India shape the global narrative, blunting Pakistan's efforts to spread misinformation and garner sympathy. So, in the summary, I can say Operation Sindoor was not just a successful military mission, it was a strategic watershed. It demonstrated India's ability to strike decisively, communicate effectively, and defend its interest with strength and clarity. And it marked the rise of new Indian security doctrine, one that is assertive, technologically driven, and globally engaged. Finally, in the summary, I can say Operation Sindoor was a decisive Indian military strike that showcased India's advanced capabilities with drones, precision weapons, cyber warfare, crippling parts of Pakistan's air infrastructure. And the operation marked a bold shift in India's counter-terrorism strategy, sending a clear message of swift and powerful retaliation. So, friends, this is all about the latest escalation between India and Pakistan and the Operation Sindoor. And I have tried to keep this video as short as possible. And I hope this video will be helpful for you. So, until then, keep learning, keep watching, keep supporting, and keep preparing. Thank you, and best of luck for your coming SSB.